This is the Audiovisual Podcast. Take a journey with your host, Kyle Dean. Explore captivating stories, insights, and experiences from diverse professionals that ignite your own creative spark. Welcome to a world beyond audiovisual. Welcome to the Audiovisual Podcast.
You're listening to the Audiovisual Podcast, and your host here with you today, Kyle Dean. Thank you for tuning in with this special broadcast going on. First off, I would like to say thank you to everybody out there for all the support that we had here for the first few episodes that started earlier this spring, around that February, March or so, and now with the second batch of episodes coming up here shortly. It's been much appreciated to all the listeners, all the family members, and all the interviewees that came in or recorded online. And we got a lot of stuff coming up here on the Audiovisual Podcast. But I really wanted to focus on the podcast itself and how it's changing a little bit in this episode. Just because we kind of started get going here with meteorologist Tom Schrader. And we have some other interviews that are lined up, which you'll have to stay tuned for. First off, I guess the biggest change is the home studio. Yes, I'll have to get a YouTube video out here to show you kind of the home studio setup that I have started to put together here in my office. As you can see, we got some of the soundproofing I guess in the office and on the walls. And so we're still trying to figure out if I need more of that soundproofing. I think so, just because after re-listening back to the Tom Schrader interview, I could tell that there was some echo that kind of picked up on the mics from his mic and then also from my mic, since we were sitting closer together on the studio setup. So once again, a few tweaks here and there that we'll have to work out. But that's what we kind of do here, is trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. The biggest change, too, as you can see here, I've kind of set up a camera system here on my other computer that I had. That's an older computer from, I think, 2011 or so. Still works great, though, because back then that was a production computer. And I say back then, but it's got like a Intel i7 processor. It's got a pretty decent graphics card too, since that one has been upgraded a couple times now. But I won't go into too many details, but keep a lookout for that as we do a studio tour here, so you guys can kind of see what I did in this little space that I have. The space is about 10 feet by 12 feet, if I'm not mistaken, after measuring up some stuff. And of course, I think you guys can see maybe all the fun stuff up here, but that was a lot of Funko Pops, a lot of collectors and stuff like that. So that part's not really done. I think I'm just trying to get the aesthetics of the studio done first. That includes all this padding, which turned out pretty well. Plus lights. I think you can see all the lights. Still working on all that. Working at hiding a lot of the wires. Still a lot of back and forth. Like I said, that's still going, but I'm super excited to see where this will be going. So I guess that's the biggest change here, since we took a short hiatus between getting into the new office and all that. And here we are with the office almost completed, and now with winter eventually setting in. And we don't want to say the S word, the SNOW word, but it's one of those things that we will probably work on a little bit more, just because we'll have a little bit more time to hopefully work on the inside aesthetics of everything. But everything's looking pretty good, I would say. So far, so good. So, change number one, office. Change number two. Now, this one was a little bit thought process in the last, I would say, couple months or so. And I always called it like the Audiovisual Podcast, but between audio and visual, there's that little slash hyphen, whatever you want to call it, the slash there. And I think that was really making the search engine, that SEO, all that marketing stuff I don't think it was working well. So I took the slash out, and then I started to kind of work on the website to start removing those slashes. All the graphics, which most of them didn't have it, but anything that I posted and everything, I really tried to take out as many of the slashes as I could there. So it's audiovisual, like one word, capital A, capital V, as the logo shows. So I guess that's the biggest thing. As you can see here, this is the website on audiovisualpod.com, and you can actually see the latest episode up there with meteorologist Tom Schrader. So if you haven't listened to it, it is about 70 minutes long, and it was a great interview, and absolutely love that he came into the office. First one in the studio. He loved the studio. Still some tweaks, but we'll get there. So for those that are listening on audio-only devices right now, so audiovisualpod.com, and just describing here what's on the website, I guess the biggest thing will be the section in orange that says everyone can be a creative leader beyond audiovisual. I wanted to try to make it a little bit more detailed in some way. That's one of those things that you're like, hey, what's your podcast about? And it's like audiovisual. What is it about? And that's where I really do this more for the fun and the hobby aspect of it. So trying to figure out exactly what it's about. And I'm sticking to my guns here to really find those creative leaders that are, not just in our local area that I broadcast from in North Dakota, but looking for more nationwide. So that's where I'm like, let's still stick on the creative side, because almost any career field that you go into has some sort of creative side. In my opinion, it does. And yeah, most of the stuff that we've been, I guess, interviewing has been more of the broadcast side, the meteorology side, marketing side, but hopefully with the few other interviews coming up, we're trying to really diversify that, and also kind of going a little bit more out of state. And that actually brings me to a little bit about the goals of this refresh of the podcast, is that I'm trying to stay local, but at the same time, I think I really want to go more broad, more nationwide. I guess you could say for that. So trying to get some more different interviews that are trying to go on the far outreaches to, going maybe East Coast, West Coast, Canada, just really trying to expand that horizon. And so if you have any suggestions, of course, you can always find the contact information here on the website. It's right there, audiovisualpod@outlook.com. And that's one of the things I really don't hit on too much is the website, our social media and everything. That has been a learning curve, I would say, just because the website aspect, is it actually needed for a podcast? And that has been the biggest aspect that I've been kind of going back and forth, because there's so many other things that really can be a great platform. The podcast host itself can be a great platform, a great link that you can go to and get all the information. So do you really need a website for the podcast? And that's kind of been a back and forth. But right now, I like the idea. I'm just trying to maintain it, continue it. And plus, it's nice where it's like, okay, here it is, episode 7, Tom Schrader. I click on listen now, and it brings me to the actual Spotify section of this. So as you can see here, kind of all listed here, and also available on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, CastBox, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio. It's just a little bit back and forth of what I was looking into. And then, of course, it has like the Facebook, the Instagram, the YouTube, and then the website too. So the podcast host itself has been the website, honestly, that has been really working pretty well. So I'm just still keeping a track of the website, see what it does in the next season here and probably the next one after that. So keep an eye on that. And plus, that's just the listen now aspect. Of course, Spotify also has the video podcast aspect. So I actually changed host, going from Pure Audio paid service to now Spotify for podcasters, which is absolutely free, which is kind of mind-blowing. And they have so many tools and so many resources. So I'm really learning the Spotify aspect. Of course, they focus more on the Spotify platform, but I've really noticed a lot of my friend group has really listened to their podcasts or their music even right on Spotify. So I think that's why I was leaning towards more that, but then it's also available on the many other platforms, which makes it really easy here on Spotify and the Spotify website. The one other change, I've been trying to do a little bit more video here, and I'm actually going to pause it here. So this right here really shows kind of exactly what I'm trying to do with more of the video, and I guess you could see that it's still a work in progress of kind of what I want to do for the camera angles. And see, I'm actually right now recording this podcast from a different computer, my more editing computer right now, because this is the one that I use mostly. The one back there is just more of the capture for video. And that's kind of the aspect I'm still trying to learn, definitely with, if I can get it now, Lumix G7 camera. And then also trying to figure out how I can get like camera A, which is, I would say, this one that you see on your screen with the two people, both me and Tom. And then camera B was I was looking for where it's more just Tom Schrader. So that just shows that angle, which I would use an old cell phone, which you can kind of tell by the graininess if you have watched the video side of the podcast. And that's one thing I'm still trying to figure out, because old cell phones only can go so far, but it's good right now, I would have to say that. I did actually have a camera C hooked up that actually focused on me, but the camera, I should say the phone, another old phone, just didn't work. So that's why in this episode, kind of the refresh, the relaunch of the Audiovisual Podcast, that there was only two camera angles, the one with Tom and I, and then the one of just Tom Schrader. So that's the one thing I am still learning on. So I'm hoping the next episode and the episodes after that, we'll have three camera angles, the one with me and the guest. Then we'll also have one of just the guest and one of just me. But of course, the podcast is not about me. It is about the guest I'm interviewing and what they bring to the creative table. So it's just one of those things that it makes it flow a little bit better. And then another thing that I've been also redoing here and kind of learning at the same time is a new program called DaVinci Resolve. Now, I'm just going to pop it up here because in college, I learned a lot of the Adobe side of everything. Adobe Premiere Pro, Adobe Audition, to an extent, Adobe After Effects. And this is one of those things that I was comfortable with, but I don't think I was exactly an expert with. Well, I kind of went back and forth between this one and another one, and the other platform I was using was HitFilm. Well, HitFilm went to a subscription based, which is HitFilm Express now or something like that, and it's kind of the exact same thing like Adobe, where it went subscription based, which it's pretty expensive, no doubt about that. So changed it up here, heard nothing but good things about DaVinci Resolve, and the best part is, for majority of almost everything, it's completely free. So with that, I edited the podcast completely on DaVinci Resolve with Tom Schrader, and honestly, I think it turned out pretty good. The flow is just like the Adobe side of everything, in my opinion, just a little bit different. The color grading was something I was still learning, so really loved it. So I'm excited to dive deep more into DaVinci because I think this can do pretty much everything that I needed to for completely free. On the video side, of course, it's one of those things that I'm still developing on that and still learning. So it's one of those things you just kind of have to sit down and take a little bit of time, which, time, there's only so much time. Definitely when you have two young kiddos that are starting to get involved in everything. And that is where this has been, a challenge. Do I release a podcast every week, bi-weekly, every 3 weeks, every month? And that's where I know consistency matters. So I would say I would have a goal of trying to do it every week. I think more realistically would be every 2 weeks, but the most realistic might possibly be, honestly, is at least every 3 weeks to once a month. So that is definitely not a definite answer, no doubt about that. But it's really something that I'm still learning, still trying to figure out, trying to balance everything, just because life gets busy, as you all know. And it's really fun to hear how a lot of these creative leaders that I interview, how they balance everything, how they got started. So I'm definitely taking advice from a lot of these people that come into the studio or also are the ones that interview online. So one of those things that I'm definitely learning, trying to balance, definitely with everything, working full time and then doing this as a hobby, and then the two kids involved in everything. And yeah, it's just kind of a little bit back and forth, no doubt about that. So overall, I would say time has been a big concern too. But this day and age, which I would have never thought in about a year ago or 2 years ago, is AI, artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence has exploded on the scene in the last 2 years. And if you don't know too much about AI, well, I think the big one has been Chat GPT, which is where you can type in a prompt like, hey, what should I set up for my starting lineup for fantasy football? And here's the players I have. And then it can list your players based on what it thinks, or what it's maybe that's not a great example, just because I think the Chat GPT model is only like a 2021 is when it was last kind of built in that information system. But it's one of those things where it can do like math problems and crunch some numbers and stuff like that. So it depends how specific you want to get into the prompt. AI art exploded on the scene now. That has been just crazy to think about. The Writers Guild strike, that has been another thing that has been related to AI. Actors and actresses, they can use likenesses, which that these film companies can use likenesses of a face, of a photo, just a photo, and maybe about 10, 15 seconds of a voice, and they can make a whole almost newscast scene with AI. And it's just mind-blowing in the last 2 years. What's it going to be in 5 years? What's it going to be in 10 years? And I always tell people, if you've seen that historical documentary Terminator, that's one you should really watch. But of course, it's a tool. And I think that's the one thing I am trying to reiterate, is that it is a tool. It's not supposed to, well, hopefully not take over a lot of this stuff, not take over like Terminator takeover, but take over a lot of these main aspects of jobs that we have done back and forth for decades for some jobs. But if you need an idea, hey, why not use it? It's one of those things that really can be a very useful tool. Now, which gets me to where I've been dabbling into the video editing side, where there's so many AIs out there now where you can take a whole 70-minute video and then it cuts it down beautifully for a quick first edit, and then you can work from there. I mean, saves a lot of time, doesn't it? There is AIs that take the entire 70-minute video, for example, and cut it down into 10 clips that could be used on Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, TikToks, stuff like that. It's just crazy what AI can do. And then it adds words on it that it shows what's the topic about, what's the person speaking about. So that itself has been another thing that has been useful, but at the same time, it's kind of, I would say, scary, mind-blowing of what it could be in another 5 to 10 years. And it's just crazy. It's a good crazy. It's a scary crazy. I just don't know what to think about it, besides that we haven't even gotten started on the AI side yet. And that is for sure on the video editing aspect or the audio editing if you just do an audio podcast. So with that, I'm just glad I'm learning the DaVinci side. Adobe has this AI stuff now. They can remove backgrounds just like that. You don't need Photoshop much anymore because an AI can do it in 3 seconds, if even that. It can write, honestly, a college paper probably with sources in about 10 seconds. And that's where, it gets a little worse. And that's, yeah, I guess I can't really explain it too much because I don't even understand how much it has really grown in the last year or two for that. So kind of continuing on this is that was kind of the refresher. So we kind of changed the name a little bit. Yes, we just removed the slash. We kind of rebranded the catchy slogan title. Yeah. So of course, once again, is everyone can be a creative leader beyond audiovisual. Another thing is a website useful? Or should we just stick to many of the other things that are around, including the podcast host itself? So it's just one of those things I'm still really trying to learn, trying to figure out what would be best on everything. By the way, if you're listening to this, please rate the podcast. Yes, I know some of them have like 1 rating, but it's 5 stars. So thank you to whoever's listening and rates it. But if you're listening on any platform, please rate. Please. It is much appreciated. I am doing this pretty much as a hobby, so that's how it's starting right now for that. Another thing is that I would say is YouTube the way to go for podcasts, because now you can listen to an entire podcast, the audiovisual podcast, and they actually do their own podcasts now on YouTube. And that's the video aspect. So I think they're trying to take a Spotify aspect that added video, but YouTube already had it. So they're just trying to capitalize on it. But of course, it all started with TikTok, had their stories, and then it went to Facebook and then Snapchat. And yeah, that was probably the wrong order. But you see, it's just like one copies after the other. And what is too much? What is too much for trying to get the word out on a podcast, especially on a hobby side? So I think that's where it's nice that the podcast host distributes to the other platforms. But I would like to try to focus on Spotify and YouTube. That's mostly what I'm going to try to focus on. The thing is, TikTok and Instagram are very lucrative on trying to get views. But I have to keep in mind, this is where I'm going back. This is a hobby, not really anything more than that. Will it become something more than that? You know what? I sure hope so. That's a good problem to have. But right now, it's definitely like try the time aspect. That's the biggest thing. So how much time do you have that? How much time do you have to post on social media? How much time do you have to do this and that and this and that? And that's one of those things where I would really say, I would say let's just focus on like 2 platforms. So, but if you listen to it on Apple Podcast or whatever it's called, if you listen to it on iHeart, if you listen on YouTube, which is a little bit different, just give it a like, give it a rating, do anything of like that to really get it involved. And yeah, this podcast ain't for everybody. It's a very broad topic, and I understand that, and that's one of the things that a lot of people say, hey, it's a little too broad of a topic. Why would people tune in? It's not really niche. It doesn't really focus on this one thing like Lord of the Rings or video games, which that brings me back. This was supposed to be more of a very gaming-centric podcast, but I've been having too much fun just interviewing these other creative leaders, and I that's what I'm focusing on. Doesn't mean I won't mention a game here and there or so like that, but I really like the core of just really focusing on these creative leaders, these people. How did they get to where they are now? And maybe they can help you with some advice, or hey, it was just a fun listen to when you're on the tractor or you are driving to work or anything like that. And I guess that's the main aspect of this relaunch, this refresh, this rebranding, which hasn't been really a rebranding per se. But other than that, that's kind of what I wanted to go over here on this episode. So once again, this is kind of my first episode that I've really done video and audio at the same time. So if you are a person listening on only the audio platforms, definitely check it out on our YouTube, which is, let's see if I can even remember it. Let's see if I can click on @Audiovisual Pod. Yeah, there you go, @Audiovisual Pod. And then you can also just go audiovisualpod.com. Remember that to find everything that you're looking for. Other than that, stay tuned for hopefully some exciting interviews coming up. I know I have like three ready lined up here after this episode's air. So got a good chunk here, and still trying to expand, trying to get a few more uniforms, a few more interviews coming up here on the Audiovisual Podcast. Of course, give us a like, a follow, a review, etc., and all that. And check it out on audiovisualpod.com. I'm your host, Kyle Dean, and thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Audiovisual Podcast. Have a good one.